Hey, everybody, welcome back to Married with Kids, where we're helping you become a better parent and a better spouse one step at a time. I'm Mark Brewer. I'm your host today, and I've got with me the ever present, amazing, and beautiful hostess, Andrea Lathrop.
Hi, Mark. Hi, everyone. Good to be with you. Not sure I understand ever present, but
I don't
uh,
really know. I just always
okay.
feel like I have to have some three-syllable words to describe you. It's like it's not good enough to just say, "Hey, Andrea Lathrop's here with me today."
I'm honored. I'm honored.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here today. So I'm excited about this subject today because it's a subject that all of us have dealt with personally. We're dealing with our kids, or we're navigating through that. It's like we're in it, or we're about to go in it, or we're just coming out of it at some level. And it's this idea of having compassion and really being able to raise kids that aren't bullies and aren't focused on their own stuff, trying to get their own way, but are actually learning how to deal with other people without bullying them, but being compassionate and loving and caring and kind. You know, all the other really words that we want to use when we describe our kids. We want our kids to be described as those words, I think, a
Yes.
lot of times.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want your kid to be known as the bully in the neighborhood, right?
Right.
Yeah, but it's
Right.
been a struggle because I heard a story the other day that you actually have a lot of experience being not compassionate, but actually working in the office of the bully.
Yeah. I have a couple of vivid memories, unfortunately, of um, being the bully. Like, I remember in elementary school, it had to be about third grade, that there was like a group of girls, and another girl had kind of lobbied to join the group. And I remember at recess kind of huddling around, kind of tight, pulling everyone in, kind of tight, and going, are we going to let her in or not into our group? And all
Mm-mm-mm.
the votes were casted, and it was a negative, and I felt like that was the right answer. And then I commissioned one of the girls to go deliver the news. And I just remember her standing far away from us and watching, the girl carry the news that you had been not accepted
Wow.
into the group.
I'm
Yeah,
just, I'm sitting here trying to think how in the world you would have allowed that to happen.
I
And
know.
that you actually, it sounds like you initiated the work involved in getting to
Yeah,
the vote. Is that correct?
yeah, yeah. I was, I think, kind of self-proclaimed kind of captain of the group at that
Ah,
point. So I didn't always, throughout elementary have all the power, but at that moment in time, I was kind of the ringleader.
really?
Yeah,
So, but at some point along the way, you kind of grew out of that, and we're going to talk a little bit about that here in the next few minutes. I don't recall being bullied very often growing up, but it was a different time. I mean, 40 years ago, people handled things a little bit differently than they do now.
sure.
But I do remember a person like you in the neighborhood. I don't remember his name, but I remember his club. And the only way into the club and the only way out of the club was through a paddling. And he had different sets of paddles. But there was this one paddle that had these drilled holes in it. And it was probably about 2 or 3 feet long. And then it had these big holes in it. And I remember one specific opportunity where my friend Jimmy in the neighborhood, he was probably a couple years older than me, but he wanted to be in the club. And so I just remember that leader of the club grabbing the big, bad, holy paddle and taking it to Jimmy's backside. And the screams that emanated from his mouth
Yes.
as he was running out of the club, he didn't even want to stay. So it was like, dude, after the paddling, you'd probably want to stick around. He didn't. He left screaming, running down and running down the street crying. So yeah, it
Yeah,
was
can't
bad.
forget that.
Yeah, it was quite a visual, but it sounds similar to the type of bully you might have been back in the day. You were doing more of the voting. He was doing more of the paddling.
Yes,
You're doing more of the voting.
right. That was, more physical. Mine was more kind of emotional.
Yeah. Well, none of
Unfortunately.
us want our kids to be bullied. Um, but I think all of us have had our kids being handled without a lot of compassion. And I know you guys have had some of that.
Yeah.
Share a little bit about this, y'all situation there.
Well, I think with both of my kids, as I think you're right, I don't think that any. kid gets to miss out on this, right? And I think about how, um, their world is kind of protected for so many years and kind of rightfully so developmentally. And then there's this shift where they become more aware of their peers. And that's like, that's good and right and normal. But with that brings all this kind of difficulty and trying to figure out how to fit in, um, who to fit in with, and if you don't fit in, kind of suffering the consequences.
Well,
And
because
so,
let's be honest, nobody wants to be on the low end of the totem pole.
right,
There's no kid that's waking up in the morning going, I'm fine just kind of being at the end of the line here or at the low end of the club spectrum and stuff. They're looking for an opportunity to kind of be on the apex or at least be in the group that's the
be in the group,
apex group. Yeah.
be in a group, even,
Mm-hmm.
so I think both of my kids have, um, definitely gone through times where other kids have been really mean, and or have said things, and we've had an incident, with one of our kids too, where it was a little bit more, aggressive and involving, lunch table kind of, you can't sit here, and um,
Oh, almost kind of like voting and saying you can't be in
are
this
you gonna?
club.
I know. I wish I wouldn't have,
No, I'm so
done that.
glad. I just
Sorry.
want to say I'm so thankful for this show that we do together because almost every episode I find out something new that I didn't know about you over the last 20 years, and it's really helping me in deepening our relationship and my
Sure.
perspective of you.
I'm sure it's helping you become a better spouse and parent one step at a
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
We'll be right back with today's episode of Married with Kids. In the meantime, we want to hear from you. If you have a topic or question you'd like us to address in the show, you can submit that by clicking the link in the show description. And don't forget, every submission is an entry into our weekly giveaway, so click that link and tell us what you think.
Yeah, I think the challenge when our kids have walked through some of this stuff is always like, how involved do you get? Like, how much
Hmm.
do we insert ourselves? Because I think any good parent that loves their kids, it's hard to see your kids hurt. It's hard to see your kids kind of suffer. It's hard to see your kids be excluded, um, or just to be on the receiving end of someone being mean. I mean, it's just hard to
Right.
watch. And so, but it's like I think good parents also know, it's like we kind of know if we rescue them from every situation, that probably doesn't ultimately serve them for the long haul either. So it's like, when do you get involved? And we've kind of, like Justin and I, my husband and I have always kind of chosen to kind of coach from the sidelines and kind of from home, and
So you aren't
not
like running
step
up to the
in at
school
the,
and jumping in and yelling and hollering
no,
and setting up multiple meetings with neighborhood
right.
parents and things. You aren't doing that.
No, we really try to restrain ourselves, even though it's hard. And again, I think there's probably always, there's cases where parents should step in, of, when it's more
Hmm.
extreme. But we're talking, I think, more kind of typical, stuff about growing up in school, and some of those realities. And so we've tried to kind of coach from the sideline. I would say one thing that, I'm kind of realizing about my own wiring and my own bent with parenting is that I have a tendency, actually, because I don't want to be those parents that kind of helicopter and intervene and make everything okay for my kid,
Hmm.
because of what that might end up playing out in as they're like young adults and adults. But I have had to kind of grow in my ability to like really listen to my kid and really take what they're saying seriously. And
Okay, so what would you do if you weren't listening? So what's the other side of that? So if I'm not really taking them seriously, what does that look like?
well, I can kind of play the devil's advocate or play the other side,
Mm.
like, so what did you do? And it's always like, well, think about how they're feeling, or I wonder what their day was like, or it's
Hmm.
always like trying to get in the other person's shoes and not like,
No, I struggle with that too.
yeah,
Melanie's regularly, I don't want to say accusing, but she's informing me that I'm moving into that gear instead of just listening and allowing for the kids to share, hey, this is what I'm going through, at least from my perspective, which is valid. It may not be accurate, but I have a tendency to immediately start thinking about, well, what about the other people involved, and what was your contribution, and why did they want to punch you in the nose, or why are they talking badly about you?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, not all parents are wired like that, but that has definitely been kind of an area of challenge for me. And I think too, I don't know if you guys have struggled with this, but I think another tension around this for me as my kids have been kind of moving through, elementary to middle school has been like, how much do I value them fitting in and being like cool and accepted and popular? Like
Mm-hmm.
how heavily do I weight that? And or do I go, be yourself, be unique? It doesn't matter. Let the chips fall. Like, I don't know. Do you guys wrestle
Well,
with that tension?
I think I wrestle with that right now. I mean,
Yeah.
as an adult,
Okay.
it doesn't. I
Yeah.
think the category ends up being the same. So I'm still, in some ways, trying to assert myself and move to a place where I can be seen, where I can be acknowledged, where I can be, seen as somebody significant, someone that has something to offer or has value. So it doesn't seem like it ever goes away. But how we activate that, either we become the bully or we become a compassionate person and learn how to deal with other people, is still so much a work in progress. So it's not surprising that our kids are dealing with this and
Right.
struggling with being compassionate people and not reverting to, well, I've got to find a way to get my way. And if that hurts other people or people get demoralized or, you know, relationships have to take a hit, I'm
Yeah.
willing because I got to be known and recognized. It's tough.
I love your honesty and your transparency with that because I think so much of this topic has to do with insecurity, and
Hmm.
that's been one of kind of my things through the years that I've been kind of navigating this with my kids is like there's insecurity on both sides of this, and even if the bully you think that they're super secure and they have it together because that's the person that has the power,
Hmm.
but my theory has always been it's coming from some kind of insecurity and some kind of trying to prove or trying to be in control or getting some kind of love recognition, something. And so what you're saying, I'm like, well, of course we're still dealing with this as adults because I'm not perfectly secure in all at all times in every
Right.
situation. So how much more adolescents or kids, I think, man, we have a couple decades on them of trying to grow in these things. And I still have times where this is a thing and
Hmm.
kind of shows itself. So I love that acknowledge that. And do you feel like it's different these days? Like bullying is more of a thing now than it was?
Well, I think it seems like you have a few more access points. So, back in my day, you either had to be really big and strong or you had to be kind of bold and beautiful. So, if you had one or a few of those elements, then you could probably have a shot at kind of making your way and rising to the top. But nowadays, if you have a social media account, you got a real
Yeah.
shot.
Yeah.
You have a real shot. I remember a few years ago when Ella was, we had just moved and Ella was in, I think, seventh or eighth grade. First of all, girls are catty. So I think they're still doing the voting thing. And
Yeah.
Ella had been kind of an apex hunter. So when we lived in the one city, she was at the top of everything, top track star and cheerleading, blah, blah, blah. And she'd always grown up there. So she got to kind of apex hunt. When we moved over to the other place, she was brand new. She didn't know anybody. And it's junior high girls. And probably every single day, it was a battle. And it was a battle for us. I can remember getting texts from her during the middle of the day, Dad, please, please, I'm begging you, please come pick me up. Nobody's my friend here. Everybody hates me. And she would hide in the bathroom. And by the way, if you're a parent listening to this, don't go find my daughter and then say, "Oh, I heard about your struggles." She knows I talk about it, but that's a number of years ago, so we're good. But that was tough, and it was tough trying to figure out, do I go up there and pick her up, or who would say that about my daughter? I'm gonna go, I'm gonna beat some people up, so to speak. I think, but there were a lot of times, man, I would stay up all night long just praying and just asking for spiritual help. God, what do I do here? How do I navigate through this? Because I didn't want to rescue her from a struggle that would make her stronger. But I also didn't want to get a call, that something bad had happened because I was
Yeah.
unwilling. So it's a real battle, man, as parents, I think, navigating through that. Not only helping our kids get through the fact that you're going to be bullied, someone's going to try to assert authority or power over you, but then also raising kids that aren't doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's the maybe even the harder thing, less the rescuing them from bullies, but helping them to become a person of compassion and a person of kindness. What do you guys? So your kids are younger than mine, by what, 8 years, 9 years, something like that.
Mhm.
So my kids have now, they're all graduated and moving on. What are some of the dynamics you guys are dealing with and trying to instill compassion so that your kids don't become the vote takers like you were?
We hope you're enjoying this episode of Married with Kids. You can find more information on today's guest in the show description. And if you want to stay up to date of episode releases and new information, make sure to click that subscribe button on our podcast or YouTube page. And now, back to Married with Kids.
We try to think about compassion a lot. I think that's where like my bent comes from, about always considering the other person's side, and that kind of gets overdone and overused at times. But I think some exposure to people that have less than what my kids have, or don't have maybe all the capabilities my kids have, and were born, without some of those, or and I think the way I talk about myself, the way I talk about others, I mean, that has kind of gone to higher alert as my kids, I'm noticing them paying more attention. They don't miss much. And so the way I talk about someone else who's different from me, or, that means a lot. And so I think it has always, I'm trying to start with myself and go, how am I compassionate towards myself? Am I compassionate towards others? And kind of trying to live that life in front of them. And then can I find ways of exposing them or helping them think about people that don't maybe weren't born in the same kind of situation, or don't have the same kinds of things, or see the world differently, and helping them to have just kind of a basic respect for other humans different from themselves. And
Right.
So those are some of the things we're trying to think through. I know. What about
Well,
you guys?
that what I've realized being a grandparent, I'm reminded that the most violent group of people and the least compassionate people and the biggest bullies on the face of the earth are about 2 years old. You just get in a room full of 2-year-olds and you see the human condition played out so starkly in front of you. And my granddaughter, who's 2, has been bullying and acting without compassion toward her 4-year-old sister, who's twice as big as her, twice as strong as her, and could just knock her block off. But what'll happen is Valley will go in there and latch her teeth onto Alessia's arm and just start biting, or grab her hair and start pulling. And Alessia will just kind of throw her hands up and just let it happen, but the whole time screaming. And Valley's just like, yeah, dude, I got you. I'm getting what I want. And so teaching a 2-year-old how to compassionately interact with her older sister has been a real journey again. I'd forgotten how tricky that is, but it just reminds me that this non-compassion bullying, I'm going to get what I want, is inside of us. It doesn't get built. It's already there. What gets built is the compassion side. What gets built is helping people reframe their life and their perspective of other people through the eyes of compassion. And one of the things, if you're listening to this, you guys probably already know I'm a Christian, so I'm a follower of Jesus. And I noticed in his writings, in the writings of his life, every time Jesus had compassion, so they actually use the word compassion, there's always an immediate action that follows. And I think that's such a good framework to work from, because there's a lot of talk about empathy and sympathy and feeling badly for people. Anybody that's ever been watching TV and saw one of the commercials with the little kid with the distended stomach or the flies all over them and stuff. We have sympathy, but compassion's different. Compassion demands action. It actually demands it. And so that journey that we're on with our kids and putting them in situations, like you said, where they have to act compassionately goes a long way in building this framework. And if they don't have any of those opportunities, that might be something that as a parent, if you're listening to this and you're going, I'm not sure my kids are getting this compassion thing, putting them in places where they will have to act on what they're feeling in their heart or seeing with their eyes is a great way. That's why people go on these humanitarian trips and missions trips, and they go, feed the homeless and things like that. And that has been one of the things. My kids have always grown up eating dinner with homeless people, because wherever I go, the homeless people find me. And there have been many date nights and many family dinners that homeless people were eating steak dinners with us and stuff. But that's just been a place where it's kind of worked for us, and it was an easy learning lesson. So
I love that. I think that goes with the basic kind of, and it is Christian, but I feel like it's really good kind of human, kind of basic ethic with our interaction with other people is the golden rule. Like, do unto others how you would want them to do to you. It's just with little people all the way through, and we're still using it in middle school and high school. And I'm using it in my own life, like treating other people the way I would want to be treated.
Yeah.
So not the way they treated me, kind of this like, retribution and, this is what, is kind of the most natural thing, right? But what we have to train and what we have to kind of keep calling ourselves and, the people we care for up to is treating people how we would want to be treated, not how they treated us. And I think that has been something we've tried to kind of, stick with. We haven't been as consistent in a lot of areas as we've wanted to be.
Oh, you said the consistent word. That's the word that all of us parents are struggling with, because
a lot of shame with that word.
When the stuff's hitting the fan, man, we're ready. We're ready to take action. Let's get this thing fixed. But the consistency, I think, is key. I think you hit on it there. In order for us to raise kids that are compassionate and not bullying their way into, levels of acknowledgement, it's going to take consistent drips over time. Yeah. And that's really the only shot we have. And man, if you start at year one, you got 18 years of dripping to get there, and then you hand them off and go, okay, let's see if this worked. And, that's a fun journey too. So let's land this. I think there might be a few questions for us to consider as we're landing this today. We got to be reminded, everybody's going to get bullied at some time, and everybody's going to bully at some time. And what we want to do is we want to be helping people become more compassionate and not using bully power to get their way. So I think the first question would be, how am I doing in that area? Am I finding myself bullying my way in? And it may look different than it does on the playground or in the hallways of the school, but
more professional, more subtle.
Oh yeah, we're way better at it. A lot more skill, a lot more time growing that. And then a second question might be, how am I showing compassion to people that are different than me? My spouse, that's a great place to ask that question and answer that question in front of the kids. How am I showing compassion to my spouse so that they can see that? And then what's a place where I could start systematically and maybe consistently giving my kids an opportunity to activate compassion? And I think that's a good way for us to land it here today. This has been fun, man. Listen, seriously, I know you kind of poke back at me when you share your stories, and I kind of deep dive into them, but I love it. I love your stories. Thank you for being open and sharing that stuff.
Thank you. Thank you. This is great.
Hey, thank you guys for being here with us again. It's been a fun time hanging out. We're looking forward to seeing you back very soon at Married with Kids, where we're helping you become a better parent and a better spouse, one step at a time. We'll see you soon.